Omar Ibn Said. For our next journey, we will revisit history the way God has led me to see it, not the version written by oppressors, not the version watered down in classrooms, but the one Allah revealed through the preserved truth in those who never let go of Him. Today's story is deep. We are retracing the footsteps of a man who did not just survive slavery. He held on to his faith while the world tried to strip him of everything. A man to whom Allah gave the pen, and in the quiet of his captivity, it was as if Allah said, "Write," and so he did, in Arabic, in exile, with dignity still intact, and in doing so, he left behind more than pages. He left proof, footprints that reached all the way to the hearts of Black children today, children like me, who needed to see that someone who looked like us never stopped calling on God. Omar Ibn Said, a man they tried to erase, but Allah preserved. This chapter is not about idolizing, it's about remembering, about how Allah places His signs in the people we overlook, about how truth survives, even in chains, when it's written with faith. Omar Ibn Said was a Futa Toro scholar from a region near Senegal, West Africa. Like many others whose names were stolen during slavery, his exact birth date remains uncertain. But based on his own account, historians estimate he was born around 1770. He was not a poor man. He wasn't a criminal. He wasn't some wild savage like they love to portray our ancestors. Omar was born into wealth, born into a family that valued knowledge, honor, and Islam. He came from Futa Toro, a land rich in both history and resistance. 50 years before Omar was even born, an Islamic uprising had already begun in West Africa. Muslim traders had reported it, and between 1769 and 1776, Muslim reformers overthrew the Fula Empire. And Omar was Fula, and to this day, the Fula, or Fulani, are the largest ethnic group in West Africa to speak the Fulani language. They were also among the first people to embrace Islam in mass numbers across the region. He was a scholar before he was slave. During Omar's childhood, Islamic leaders in his region stood firm. They banned the trading of slaves in the Senegal area. They even negotiated with the French to stop the selling of Muslim people into slavery. But as we all know, agreements with colonizers are paper thin. Still, Omar's life in West Africa was not defined by slavery. It was shaped by knowledge. He sought Islamic learning for 75 years. Let that sink in. Before being captured, he was already a well-rounded scholar, trained in math, astronomy, trade, theology, and Arabic. He even learned the concept of jihad, which many misunderstand today. But Omar knew. Jihad meant to spread Islamic knowledge peacefully. It meant struggle in the path of truth. Not war, not force, but education and light. Then came the darkness. A large army raided his homeland. He was captured and sold into the hands of a Christian man near the sea. The ship that took him across the Atlantic was called the Heart of Oak. But don't let the name fool you. There was no heart in that journey. Omar himself wrote in his journal that over 109 people died on that ship, and he survived. They took his name, they took his home, they took his land, his language, his dignity, but they couldn't take his mind. Because even when his hands were bound, his soul was still wrapped in ayat. His memory still whispered prayers, his tongue still formed Arabic under his breath, even if no one around him understood a word. But don't think that made him immune to the pain. This wasn't the story of a heartless warrior. This was a man with feelings, with memories, with loss that had no outlet. We don't know if he had children, but imagine if he did. Imagine being chained to strangers who speak your tongue, but none of them are your blood. Imagine being surrounded by people who look like you, breathe like you, cry like you, but you're all too broken to speak. And the cold, that ocean wind slicing through your clothes, your ankles cuffed, wrists stiff with rust, your people lined up next to you, some too weak to speak, some praying they don't wake up. You can't help them. They can't help you. But in that moment, all you know is, if I die here, at least we die together. And yet, he lived. He didn't lose his mind. Because while the body was enslaved, the heart was still free, anchored to the one who never left, the creator of the universe, one God, one truth, one silent strength in the dark. Here's where it gets deep. Omar was so educated he wrote in a language none of his captors could understand, Arabic. He didn't curse. He didn't cry for pity. He wrote. His first enslaver was a small, cruel man in South Carolina named Johnson, but Omar didn't stay there long. He escaped. Though he was captured again, he wouldn't remain still for long. He was held at a rice plantation for 2 years, then escaped again around 1810. Eventually, he was recaptured by a white man who made money by hunting down black people who dared to run toward freedom. He was taken to North Carolina and held there in a room for 16 days and nights. And what did he do in that cell? He filled the walls with Arabic petitions, asking for his release. He didn't plead in English. He spoke to Allah in the language of revelation, and Allah heard. Eventually, Omar was sold again, this time to a man named Mitchell who ordered him to walk to Charleston. Omar said, no. So instead, he went with Bob Mumford, whose daughter arranged for him to settle in Fayetteville, North Carolina. There, he was taken in by the Owens family, and for the first time in years, he wasn't beaten, he wasn't starved, he wasn't stripped naked or called names. He called them righteous in his writings, not because they were saviors, but because they were simply not cruel. And after what he had endured, basic decency felt like relief. In 1819, something strange happened. John Lewis Taylor, the first Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court, sent one of Omar's Arabic writings to Francis Scott Key. Yes, the same man who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. Why? Because they couldn't understand what Omar was writing. But they knew it was important. Omar had written about wanting to return home, to Africa. But also within his writing were verses from the Qur'an. Ayat filled his letters, divine truth in plain sight. But they couldn't see it. Later, the Owens gave Omar a Bible that Francis Scott Key had arranged, written in Arabic. In 1820, Omar converted to Christianity. He was baptized. He joined the church. But don't get confused. Even after becoming Christian, Omar continued to quote Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and referenced the Qur'an in his writings. Why did he convert? It's important we understand this without judgment. Omar's conversion was likely strategic. He saw that it benefited him in the system. It gave him a level of protection. It gave white Christians a reason to accept him. They loved him for that. They showcased him. But in his heart, only Allah knows. His writings still carried Islamic phrasing. His memory still quoted Revelation. And his story? It remains a testimony that Islam had entered America, long before the nation ever understood it. I want to finish off this segment by saying, although I used his name, his masters didn't use his, and his name only lived because he wrote it down himself, only because he preserved it in Arabic, with his own hand. To the people who enslaved him, they couldn't pronounce it. They couldn't understand it. To them, he was just a Negro slave. But Omar himself never forgot his name. He signed it in his writings. He called himself Omar Ibn Said from Futa Toro. After all, always remember that Omar believed all his trials and tribulations were for good. He knew his long life wasn't random. It was protection and a message from the one who never abandoned him.